Hey guys, it's Steve Riddle here. How you doing? Today's an interesting day. It marks 50 years since the passing of the legendary guitar player, singer, songwriter, and force of nature that was Jimi Hendrix. And I've been wanting to make a video actually for a while, kind of talking about Hendrix and some thoughts on him. And today seemed like a good day to do it. Gosh, there's so many things I'd love to touch on. Since Jimi, I mean, there's no doubt that Jimi was a one-man revolution of the instrument of guitar. The fundamental change that came to music was a seismic shift after he came on the scene. I'm not old enough to have seen him live, or I know other people are, other musician friends of mine are, and they've commented on it. And I can only imagine, those of us that are my age and younger, we've had to see it in videos and hear stories and whatnot. But even seeing things on film, it's just clear how powerful the guy was and how powerful his music was. And guitar was really never the same after he came along. He really was, I guess, to me, somebody that really ushered in probably rock music or guitar solos in a way that I guess I would say kind of defines it. Obviously he had some contemporaries that were doing some things that were very loud and electric and things as well, but Jimi was really kind of set the standard for so much of that. And so it's hard for me to talk about, since I'm not of that time period and I wasn't a contemporary of those people, it's hard for me to really feel like I can properly put into perspective how things changed once he came along. But I'd like to speak to it as an observer and a student of his music, and someone that's just loved his music, been a fan of his music, and heavily influenced by his music my whole life. I came up in an era of, being a kid and hearing music from the 80s and the 90s, 2000s, and, we had 80s rock and all of our guitar heroes and Joe Perry's and Slash and, all these guys that were on the radio, and then of course the stuff that came into the, 90s and 2000s, and guitar solo kind of went away, different things happened. It's interesting how Jimi's music was so powerful. It has remained this incredibly strong force from the 60s all the way up till now. And it's still, he's still this incredibly impactful musician and guitarist to so many generations of musicians and people that come up. And so it's a question I've often asked myself, as a fan, as a listener, as a musician and guitarist, what is it about Jimi that made Jimi so special and something that so many of us connect with in so many different ways? And I've done a lot of thinking about that over the years, and I think it's a few things. I think that Jimi, to me, is the embodiment of probably the purest spirit of a human being trying to pursue their musical vision and being connected with it in such a close and direct way, and putting it out there kind of fearlessly without, worry about judgment from anybody. Somebody being willing to experiment, try new things, make sounds that had never been laid down on tape before, or maybe even heard in concert before, and just enjoying it. I think, Jimmy clearly wanted to be a rock star, and he wanted to play his music for people. But I think one of the things that Jimmy really felt strongly that we can relate to when we become musicians is he just wanted to make music. He loved the process of making music passionately. And that, I think, is what we fall in love with Jimmy. I mean, when you hear Jimmy play, or when you hear him talk about his music, or interviews or whatnot, I mean, it really does. It clearly comes down to the music more than the stage act or anything else. And when you think about that music, at the end of the day, even though the guitar solos are amazing, it's about the songs. It really is about those songs. We've had a lot of great guitar players that have, existed since Jimmy, and guitar playing has come a lot further than Jimmy's guitar playing, obviously, in techniques and things like that. But I don't know that anybody's ever made any better music than Jimmy made. Those songs are fantastic songs, and the guitar playing and the singing, and the lyrics, everything, it goes together perfectly, and it produced these timeless songs that are just wonderful, wonderful songs. And they become so many of these staples that we as guitar players love to get together and jam and solo over. I mean, you get a bunch of guitarists on the stage. We'd love to play Little Wing and, take turns jamming over it for hours, or Voodoo Child or something like that. They were just perfect platforms for that type of stuff. And just, he wrote such a diverse body of music, like May This Be Love, interesting chord progressions, things like, whether it's like something like Crosstown Traffic, or he wrote very unique things. When you hear things like Castles Made of Sand, or Burning in the Midnight Lamp, it's like, I'm not sure that there was anything really remotely like that in terms of, song composition before. And there's really not people making stuff similar to that nowadays. But it's incredible stuff. And, I'm as big of a fan of fantastic guitar playing as the next guy, and I, of course, love all, the best shredders in the world and the most soulful players and all these different types of music that have come along since Jimmy. But what's interesting, very often I'll go buy, an album of, whatever the next new album is by, super hot guitar virtuoso. And, you may listen to it once and then just never play it again, because the songs aren't that great. And it could be amazing guitar playing, but it's just like, you don't ever feel the need to go back and hear that song. But with Jimmy, I want to hear those songs, and that's why that stuff has stood the test of time, from the 60s all the way till now. And it doesn't appear to be dying anytime soon. And Jimmy was such a tremendous player. That's another thing I think that musicians really love about him. He was a fantastic rhythm player. He was a fantastic lead player. He could seamlessly blend the two together in his style, and he was, virtuoso in different styles that he blended together. I know for me as a young guitar player, that's one of the things that really attracted me to his music. You know, I grew up playing in trios, and I love that idea of a guitar player being able to try and carry everything. You know, and one of my favorite pieces of music, something that nobody really talks about, but there's a track that is from the live Woodstock album that Jimmy did, and I don't think it has a proper title. They usually just call it Woodstock Improvisation, or at least that's what it was called on the first release that I have of the CD. And so he plays this. It's a rhythm guitar and some lead guitar, you know, intermingled together. And then I think it fades into, you know, Villanova Junction at some point. But, you know, it's just so inventive, the guitar playing, the rhythm guitar playing, of what he's doing there is so inventive and cool. And still to this day, I've never heard anybody do anything quite like it. And just a remarkable track. I know that album's been re-released several different ways. It's also been put on, you know, in video format and DVDs and Blu-rays and different things. And that often the order of those tracks is changed from what the CD order was. I played that initial CD over and over, so it's ingrained in my mind in the order in which it was, you know, originally you know, placed on that CD, which may or may not have been the order that it was played at Woodstock. I don't know, you know, with the Woodstock videos that are edited, I don't know if they're edited in the same order or if things have been moved around or whatnot, but anyway, it's just an incredible piece of music. And that really I just felt was because so much of that is it's just him. It's just, you know, the band lays out for a good portion of that, and he's just there and he's just playing the most incredible, you know, rhythm guitar. He's changing rhythms. He's changing keys. He's changing the tempo. His attack on the strings is changing. Just incredible guitar playing. His tone and his touch to me was something that just always stood out, and much in the same way that you know, for Stevie Ray Vaughan, it really you know, jumped out at me. And Jimmy was the same way. You could hear him play these delicate, soft little passages that are just most beautiful, clean guitar you've ever heard in your life, you know. And then he goes from that into the most wailing, fuzzed out, feedback, you know, crazy tones that you've ever heard, and everything in between. I think that you know, again, to me, the expressiveness of the instrument, of the guitar, and some of the things that only a guitar will allow you to do, really, compared to a lot of other instruments. He just completely maximized that, and I think as guitarists, we're all influenced by that level of technique and sensitivity and how he incorporated it into his music. I think, you know, also too, there's another interesting aspect of his music. There's an album that not a lot of people talk about, and it's called In From the Storm. It's a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, and they have all these guests that played on it. It was like Paul Rogers, and Doug Pinnick is on there singing a lot of material. I think Brian May plays on there, Steve Lukather. You know, there's all these fantastic musicians. Steve Vai is playing on there. But anyway, it's with orchestration, and you've got strings, you know, in the background, and it's just these beautiful, lush soundscapes that are built around Jimmy's music. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but every now and then I'll go and listen to it, and it's just incredible. And that really speaks to what could be done with his music, you know, and just how beautiful it is. I mean, once you add those other arrangements, you really start to realize just how absolutely beautiful those songs and those arrangements were. So I definitely would recommend you listening to that, checking it out. You know, in terms of stage presence, probably very few guitarists ever had the stage presence that Jimi had. You know, seeing it on video and just being an incredible performer, captivating an audience, not just with his playing, but with, you know, he did all the antics, set the guitars on fire, and you know, smashed into the wall of amps, and, you know, broke the grill cloths and all those other things that he did, smashed guitars, you know, and all this. I mean, he was a showman, you know, right? And he came out of that school of, you know, the blues players on the Chitlin circuit and people that were doing all those things, you know, playing behind their head and doing the splits and playing guitar, you know, like T-Bone Walker and all these old guys. And so he took all that and he amplified it and just took it to a whole nother level. Recently I bought the biography on Michael Bloomfield, and I'm a big fan of Michael Bloomfield. And one of the things that's really, really interesting in that biography, I encourage you to pick it up and read it, but one of the things that's really interesting is he talks about the fact that once he heard Hendrix and saw him live, he basically didn't want to play guitar anymore. I mean, for like a year, he was just floored because he just felt like he was, you know, he knew he was the hot player and he was kind of the guy prior to seeing Jimi. And he just said, you know, that he's quoted as saying he heard every single sound in the world come out of that guitar in the way Jimi played it when he saw him on this, you know, little stage in the Village, you know. So you know that he had to be incredible for players like Michael Bloomfield to be completely intimidated by him and blown away, you know, when they saw him. And so it says so much about how he affected his, you know, his peers and contemporaries at that time. So at the risk of possibly continuing to go on, you know, too long, which I probably already have, I just wanted to kind of mention those few things about Jimi. We're fortunate in that there's a lot of pictures of Jimi. There's a pretty good amount of video footage that's available. He put out a tremendous amount of music in the short period that he was recording professionally. I mean, what's amazing is, you know, you think about it, he put out so much music in such a short period of time of his active, you know, active career of being a professional recording artist under his own name. I mean, imagine if he had recorded for, you know, these other, you know, well, it's been 50 years since, but even if he just recorded another 20 years, imagine what he would have put out. 30 years. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think at, you know, with the creative output that he had during his lifetime, what he might have put out, you know, since then. And with the advances in technology, I mean, we've got all these things now that he never had. We basically only had a few effects. They had a fuzz box and they had some tricks to make delay sounds, and you know, they had reverb tanks and some of these other things. But, you know, you didn't have this wealth of effects that we have with all these different types of delays and phasers and you know, I mean, it's just incredible what we can do now with all the different effects that we have for guitar. And you got all the modelers and you know, MIDI guitar where you can hook the thing to a keyboard and get sounds that way. I really believe if Jimi had, you know, stayed alive, I think he would have explored all of that. And I think you would have probably heard some of the most, you know, space age out there sounds of anybody, because he would have continued to experiment. And I'm sure he would have jumped back and forth, probably. I mean, it's all speculation, but I think he would have probably continued to jump back and forth and make very soulful, rock and blues rock, and R&B influenced music. But I think he would have got really out there with some of the stuff. So anyway, all we can do is really just imagine and wish, so many of these guys that we lost early like that. Stevie Ray Vaughan's another prime example. I mean, who knows what we would have heard from that guy if he'd continued to live. But anyway, that's a separate video. But Jimmy was incredible. There's no doubt he's going to continue to affect so many up-and-coming guitarists and musicians. My kids are young adults, and they've grown up from hearing me play all this Hendrix music, and they love Hendrix. So it's funny to see these kids that were raised in the what do they call the teens? I don't know. They call it 2010s. Is it the teens? I don't even know what we call them. Anyway, but to see these kids that were raised in the early 2000s, that they love this music that's come from the 60s, because it's just that great. It transcends everything. So I just wanted to put this out there, and I wanted to say thank you so much, Jimmy, for your music, your passion, your creativity, your willingness to pursue your muse, and leaving us with such a wonderful, wonderful legacy of your music and all the things that you did for the electric guitar and rock music and music fans in general. And maybe you guys, if you want to leave something in the comments about your thoughts on Jimmy and what he's meant to you, or if you saw Jimmy live, or if you have any experiences, anything interesting that you'd like to share with anybody else about Jimmy, I would love to read it. And anyway, Jimmy, we miss you, and we know your spirit will continue to live on forever. Thanks, everybody. God bless.